4 years, Doctor Who has been the staple of the sci-fi community, encouraging us to explore time and space with every iteration of the Doctor. And now, with the dawn of the 13th Doctor's first season, the P3 Network is proud to present the Doctor Who Review. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I, of course, am Bobo, and this is the Doctor Who Review. I'm here with a friend, a coworker. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hello, I am the mystery man of mysterious madness, Matthna.
So, do we just call you for short?
Just call me M.
Fair. All right. So, the whole purpose of this is Matt and I, M and I, were sitting in the back of work, and we were talking about Doctor Who. And I had a suggestion last week from one of our regular listeners that we do a Doctor Who show. So I said to Em, "Hey, I'm free tomorrow. Are you free tomorrow?"
And I was like, "Yeah, let's get this done."
So here we are. We're talking about the newest episode 3 of the 13th Doctor's inaugural season, and it was called Rosa. And a warning for everyone right here, right now. We are not holding back. There will be spoilers.
Just like the episode, we literally and figuratively will not pull any punches.
Please don't punch anybody in here. That would hurt. I don't think that's a good idea.
It's drywall. They can fix it easily.
Well, here's to getting kicked out of the library. So, to start, we are... I'm going to get your... I've expressed my opinions to the P3 Network about the 13th Doctor. I want to hear your opinions of the first 2 episodes.
See, for me, the first 2 episodes, I really did like them. Thing is, with the 13th Doctor, I was always hoping that the 13th Doctor was going to be a woman. I think Doctor Who was ready for that change, especially in the culture around the world that we live now. And I'm not going to lie, when I said I wasn't nervous, per se, with Jodie, not because she's not a fine actor or anything, just simply because, she's got a lot of things to live up to. You have Tennant, Smith, definitely some of Capaldi's work for certain episodes, and so I just was hoping that the pressure and YouTube commenters or any commenters who get very vocal with strong opinions really didn't kind of deter her performance. And for the first 2 episodes, they were magnificent, and I really think it was the second episode I was able to start seeing where her Doctor was heading as far as her personality and the way the Doctor always takes her/his presence in a situation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I agree. And I felt like, especially with the second episode, finding that TARDIS.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, that entire episode was an emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
It was a great episode, and I really feel that she has established herself. With the second episode, I feel like she established herself.
Oh, 100%. And little fun fact, I can't remember if it was the TARDIS designer or Chris himself, the new head of the episodes, who asked Jodie what her favorite cookie was.
Okay.
Because if you remember in that episode, she presses on a little lever with her foot, and a cookie, rolls down her new TARDIS. That is legit her favorite cookie.
Nice.
And that's how you introduce somebody into a new show, is you sweeten them up.
That explains the absolute look of joy on her face.
I do not know whether or not she knew that was coming. I was just hoping that that's just completely ad-libbed.
Oh, I hope so too. So let's take a breath here. Let's start with the new episode. So spoiler alert, starting now.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, hurry up and see it. Well, you can pause us. That's the glorious thing about being on the internet.
Exactly. And when we introduced ourselves, I used the phrase, both literally and figuratively, pulling no punches. And just to start this off, my gosh, their portrayal of the 1955 South.
Yeah.
That was absolutely amazing, and I'm going to say this as simply as I could. It was uncomfortable in the ways that it should have been.
Exactly. I mean, it was brutally honest. And yes, it's coming from across the pond, so
yes.
It's, they don't, I don't even feel like the writers soften their own history.
Exactly.
In the British Empire. So, I feel like, seeing it as Americans, seeing that point, it made me ask a lot of questions of my parents who grew up in the 50s and 60s, late 50s and the 60s. And I learned more just from asking them questions than I ever learned in school about Wisconsin in that time period.
Exactly. And one of the things too is I think everybody has one of those family members that's openly, very open about their opinions that are biased. Yeah. To put it simply, racist.
To put it simply, yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is that when I grew up, that used to be my father. And I say used to be in a broad sense of the term. He's not the greatest human being, but he's not the worst. But lately, it's one of those things where he's actually gotten to know other races. There's neighbors, there's friends. He gets to talk to them. And in the car, he was talking about how he even told me, I never knew, and I got this wrong. And so hearing that a week before I saw this episode, it did have a little bit more of an impact on me. And it's one of those things where this episode was just touching. And it was one of those episodes that when you're done with it, you think to yourself, wow, I'm going to show this to people. Not just show this to people as in, this is a good episode for Doctor Who fans. This is something that you'd see like in a school class. Yeah. This is something you sit down and you're like, gather up your kids in the future and like, hey, let's watch this episode.
A little shout out to my 12th grade English teacher, not English teacher, I'm sorry, 12th grade American history teacher, Mr. Blood. When he showed us Forrest Gump, because that was definitely a defining movie. Oh yeah. And I feel like this is something he would show in his class, because he's a very fun teacher. So I feel like this is something he would show in his class. So they open the episode with them arriving, and the Doctor is looking at what time frame this is, and we're in the United States during 1955, and you see her kind of go like, oh boy, this might be a hair of an issue. So you'll hear somebody entering here. Just no worries, it's just UMC getting ready for the Friday night party directly after this recording.
Yeah.
So,
but sorry for interrupting.
No, it's okay.
But at the same time, you see the Doctor a little bit worried. It's subtly done.
It's subtly done, but it's well done.
Oh yes, definitely. But then you look at her companions, and obviously, the companions, they have lived in the modern era, and I'm not saying that we're perfect right now. They even address that in the episode.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But when they hear 50s, they think of the classic cars, milkshake diners, and of course, Elvis. You gotta name drop Elvis.
Oh, yeah, they did name drop Elvis. I almost forgot about that. And you hear the doctor say, oh, yeah, I can give him a call. And all of a sudden, she's like, don't tell anyone I gave him a cell phone.
Yeah. And I just love that. And so it's kind of like really cool because, you get like the classic Doctor Who vibe of these people going to the past. They want to see certain things. And as far as like the main plot of the episode, it is definitely one of those, as far as like time travel and sci-fi goes, a very simplistic plot as far as, the whole premise of it. But it's where Doctor Who shines with the season 5 episode, Vincent and the Doctor, where you take something so simple that's been done a million times and then you work it into something that you're never going to forget.
And they did just that. So then we get out into the world, into the United States, into Montgomery, Alabama in 1955. And of course we have two dark complexioned actors.
Yep, Ryan Sinclair, and I forgot the police officer's name. It's not that she's not a memorable... Yes, thank you.
Yes.
It's not that she's not a memorable character. It's just when you say Ryan Sinclair, that name has a ring to it, and it gets in your head.
And Ryan and Yaz, being darker skinned, they're you see a little bit of apprehension, but it's not like they're more in awe.
Yeah.
And a white gentlewoman, we'll say,
yes,
drops her kerchief on the ground. And Ryan, being Ryan...
Yeah, nice guy and everything.
Bends over to pick it up. And he goes to touch the woman on the shoulder. Hey, you dropped this. And dude, her husband, whips around and whack right across the face. Thus the not pulling any punches.
Yeah, and it's from that moment on, you're like, okay, we're doing this.
Big time.
And one of the things is with Doctor Who, I myself have not seen a lot of classic Who, so I don't know how that was addressed. But when you had companions like Martha and Bill, when they traveled back in time to the time of slavery and segregation, Martha brought it up, but at the same time, the Doctor kind of just pushed it to the side, like, oh, don't worry about it. And it's not like they were trying to avoid it, but the episodes weren't about that. Same thing with Bill in season 10 with the Frost Fair, where the one a-hole business guy was like, business more than human lives. What is this creature doing? And Capaldi just decks him in the face.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, let's just go on to the rest of the episode. Once again, we're not exactly avoiding it. We realize that it's there, but at the same time, once again, not what the episode's about.
Right. So they're not avoiding the subject, but they're not direct. They're not in 1955 Alabama directly facing it.
Yeah, exactly. So when you see this,
oh man. And so then, we progress through the episode a little bit. And of course, actually, that's actually where we see our first glimpse of Rosa Parks. She steps in between the Doctor and Yaz and Ryan and says, hey, sir, this needs, I'm working on your order. It'll be done. You can pick it up.
Yeah.
And just distracts this entire problematic instance.
She just diffuses the tension with a sentence.
And, Rosa Parks was a gentlewoman of her own right.
Oh, yeah.
She was a good speaker. She spoke she spoke in a way that could diffuse situations.
Exactly.
And so they show that immediately. Then she's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And she kind of yells at everybody.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts is when she's talking to Ryan. Obviously, she's from the 50s, and even if time travel was real, came up to us from the year 3000, we wouldn't know. So she goes up to Ryan and is like, "Your mother taught you any manners, and I better get a yes from that."
Yeah, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
And it was, oh man, it was so in I can't even say the word. It was perfect for the era.
Yes.
And then we move on and we see the doctor. The doctor figures out that there are particles surrounding Rosa Parks that shouldn't be there. Time travel particles, per se.
Yeah, and exactly. And before anybody thinks what they're thinking, there's so much technobabble. Even if you are a physicist, there's only so much you can handle. So time travel particles are what we're sticking with.
Yeah, because I couldn't remember if I just watched the episode 10 seconds ago.
Yeah.
So they talk about the time travel particles, and they talk about how this shouldn't be happening, oh no. And somebody is trying to interfere with this important moment in the past. It's 2 days before she sits?
Or think the day before? It was the day before.
Day before she sits. And stays seated on the bus. And they have to make sure that whoever is trying to stop her from happening, they have to make sure it happens.
Yeah.
Because this is immensely important part of history.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
So they continue. They meet this new man.
Yeah.
And they find his gear stashed away in a warehouse in Montgomery. And actually it's at the bus depot in Montgomery. And they take it. Well, the doctor, takes his gear and messes with it a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, I love this story for the story. It's amazing. It speaks to you, but at the same time, I think I'm not the only one that kind of squeed when we got the mention of another vortex manipulator.
I had very small hopes that it wasn't going to be some bad guy and that it was going to be our one and only Captain Jack.
Oh, yeah.
So when she says, there's a vortex manipulator, and the companions are like, wait, what?
Yeah.
She continues explaining it to him a little bit, not too much detail, but then they get interrupted by, as I was told in a distinct fashion, the most handsome bad guy that they've ever had.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I guess, but so he interrupts. He starts shooting at them with a disruptor that disrupts an object or a person in time.
Yes, and I love what they do with this because later on in the episode, the doctor confronts him, and you find out obviously he's from the future, vortex manipulator. But the prison he was at, in order to get him released, they stuck something in his brain that stops him from hurting or killing anybody. So basically his little time disruptor thing sends them back in time, and it's one of those loophole technicalities where he could send them to get eaten by a fucking T-Rex.
Yeah.
But at the same time, since it's not the blood on his literal hands, doesn't matter.
And so for anybody who who may remember this, it's kind of familiar to any American who is a fan of Joss Whedon's work.
Oh, yes.
Because Spike has something very similar planted into his skull where he can't hurt people.
Oh, gosh, that was a great arc.
Yes, it was. So, just kind of we'll come back to that when on Vintage Reviews someday.
Yeah.
Because I'm sorry, I want to review Buffy.
Same.
And so, yeah, you find out that this guy can't literally hurt anyone, at least not physically.
Yeah.
But he can disrupt this time in such little ways that could make it bad.
Another thing that I want to talk about is I feel like they're finally addressing something nobody wants to think about, but would very much be real, is that he's not back to like displace Rosa Parks and like show her an exhibit in the future. He's not going back for some world-ending plot. He's going back because he wants to set back the civil rights movement.
Yep.
And you gotta think, no matter when you have lived, no matter how old you are listening to this right now, you know that racism survives.
Oh, absolutely.
And so it's like that thing where it's realistic and nobody wants to talk about it, but if we did have time travel, oh yeah, this is definitely plausible.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to take a really short break here, just to give our sponsor a shout out. We'll be back here in just about 25 seconds. Hey, Wisconsin listeners, this is Bobo. The games and movies we talk about on the P3 network could be yours. How? Check out Mojo's Electronics in Antigo, Shawano, and Oshkosh, Wisconsin. That's Mojo's Electronics, exclusive friends of the P3 Podcast Network.
Bob, can I come out of the basement yet?
And no, I have still not let see out of the basement.
It sucks down here.
So, back to the episode. The next big thing that would happen would be this guy decides he's going to change the bus schedule, change the driver. He destroys the driver's bus. I mean, he goes through several things that should have displaced this to the point of no return.
And this is something that's absolutely very interesting, because when you've seen Doctor Who in the past, it's something like, hey, why is there a statue of Julius Caesar in the middle of Egypt? Like, really big, out-of-place things that are just, as soon as the companions get out, I don't remember that in my history books.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to see something small have such a huge impact to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry for interrupting. Before we go any further, one thing that needs to be addressed, the hotel room scene.
Oh, yeah. So, they had to sneak in through the window of the hotel. Yaz and Ryan.
Yes.
And Yaz and Ryan sneak in, and about, maybe 4 minutes later?
Oh, yeah, you get that police officer.
The police officer knock on the door. Yaz and Ryan run into the bathroom, close the door. Doctor stands in front of the bathroom, and in comes this kind of stereotypical Southern police officer.
Oh, yeah,
from
and
the 50s.
Here's the thing. I think everyone can kind of tell by some of our mannerisms and just... Okay, Wisconsin. Everyone in this room is whiter than a tub of sour cream, and I was sweating during this scene.
Same. Yeah. So, I mean, he comes in and he gives them a big old speech, asks them what they're doing there. Graham says that they're going to pitch a cell phone, basically.
Yeah,
he says it in more complicated terms, but he's saying, yeah, we're going to pitch a cell phone to these guys.
And I love it, too, because the way he acts is that this is in the past. When he was taken to an alien world, he didn't really have to worry about how he acted. But, you have the whole thing of Jodie's doctor saying, time travel, the past is very delicate sometimes, according to the plot. But anyway,
yeah.
No, so he's nervous. You can see this. It's not just nervous as in, he's trying to protect his grandson and Yaz. It's the thing of, like, he's never done this, and he doesn't want to give something away that will mess up the future. And so he just stumbles. And it makes the scene somehow even more tense.
Mm-hmm. And more accurate.
Oh, yeah.
So the police officer goes, opens the bathroom door, kind of pushes past the doctor, who looks pissed.
Yeah.
He checks behind the curtain of the bathtub. He shoves his head out the window to make sure they're not out the window. And he walks out telling them, get out of town when you're done.
And I still think there's a little bit of Peter Capaldi. And for those who have not seen the episode but are still listening, the doctor writes on the wall with basically a magic pen that when she sonics it, the writing disappears. A little bit of me is just hoping a sliver of Capaldi is in there so that when they leave, there's just a big letters on the wall saying racist dick.
And you see, I've said a couple of times during various episodes, oh, hey, 13, your 10 is showing. 13, your 12 is showing.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man, 13, your 11 is showing. But here, it's pure her.
Yes.
Like, there's no inklings of the other doctors, except maybe a hair of 10.
Yeah.
But anytime you have the villain, I feel like we're going to get a hair of 10 out of any villain face-to-face.
See, for me, the thing is that I loved Tennant. I absolutely do. But, like, one of the things is that Jodie is definitely one of those high, energetic doctors. Kind of, I don't want to say completely like Matt Smith, because that doesn't do her justice.
No.
But one of the things that happens with the doctor is, with Tennant, he was suave, but in a sort of James Bond way, where you walk into a room and he has a presence to him by the way he dresses, his hair, the way he acts, that you think, oh yeah, he could be friendly, but at the same time, you don't want to cross him.
Right.
With Matt Smith, and to be honest, a little bit with Jodie, when you have this energetic goofball, when he goes and slaughters an entire race, you're like, oh wow, yeah, I didn't see that coming, and now I'm terrified of you slightly. Yeah. And it's nice when you see that with the Doctor, because the Doctor's whole goal is to save people, it is to fix things, but at the same time, he or she is not above, killing a lot of people to do so.
I mean, I don't know if we'll see that from Jodie, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I feel like she's going to be less of a violent doctor unless you push her.
Yeah.
Because she's already said no to guns. That was I'm sorry, that was the first moment where I'm like, oh, 13, your 10 is showing.
Yeah.
And so I feel like with this episode it was purely her. There wasn't any, other than her telling Ryan not to mess with the disruptor.
Yeah.
And then Ryan, being an independent man, decides to take the manipulator and blast our bad guy into the past.
Yeah, as far back as he can go.
And I feel, because it was Ryan who defeated him,
yeah,
I feel like we have our first ever recurring villain for the 13th Doctor.
And I would love to see that.
I would too.
And another thing we were talking about yesterday in the back of our work is that we are both honestly okay with if they decide to wait for the Daleks and the Cybermen and
absolutely.
Those classic Who villains, because it really gives Jodie a chance to shine and show her intelligence as the Doctor.
Exactly.
Because at the same time, Daleks, Cybermen, iconic, scary, but, they're defeated in an episode, just a single episode so often, it really loses the weight. And right now, having new characters and not just throwing them at her really shows her strength.
I agree. So, the end of the episode. Let's go to it, because this is the most heart-wrenching part, and I feel like it's going to be a big part of the last 14 minutes here, 13 minutes, whatever we do. They get Rosa on the bus. Graham says, "Doctor, we can leave now. We got her here. There's people on the bus. She's going to be made to stand." And the doctor looks around and says to Graham, "If 3 people stand up right now and walk out this door, she won't have to move."
And guess what? It happens.
Graham says, "No, I don't want to be a part of this history. I don't want to. I don't want to be a part of this moment." And he is like, you see the first absolute torment in his eyes. You see torment in the doctor's eyes, because she doesn't even want to be a part of this history, but she is.
And it's one of those things, like what we were saying before, it was the little things that were being changed, because now, the 3 people that were supposed to be on there, Ryan chased after them. And obviously, him being Ryan, it being the South, they're like, "No, screw you, we're going."
Yeah.
And so it's this whole thing where, it's the wrong side of history, but at the same time, they're doing it for the right reasons. And it's absolutely heart-wrenching, because you have these characters. They grew up hearing Rosa Parks' name. There's even part in the episode where Ryan gets to meet Martin Luther King. And that's amazing. You see him, and this does not do it justice by saying it this way, but it's like a kid who's grown up with Star Wars and they get to meet Mark Hamill or James Earl Jones at a convention.
Or, literally any member of that cast.
Yeah, but at the same time, like I said, I can't say that because it doesn't do it justice.
No, it doesn't.
He was in a room with people that changed the world.
Yeah, not just America, the world.
And the thing is that when Ryan got punched, when Ryan had to jump out of the bathroom window, you see him and Yaz hiding behind a dumpster, and he's talking about how his grandmother taught him to control his anger. He is never seeking out violence with any of these people. The only one he, not hurts, displaces, is the time-traveling villain. So you get to see him in this time period.
It was heart-wrenching. It was terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Rosa talks about Emmett Till.
Yeah.
Who was lynched and hung and thrown in the river, killed. I don't think he was hung. I think he was just killed. I think he was just shot. I don't remember that part of my history right now. Emmett Till. She mentions him, and you're like, and you and us as Americans sitting there. Wait a minute! I remember learning about that in school. I remember that was a big thing. And then Rosa, and it's like, and then Martin Luther King Jr. And it was, to me, this was the episode of Doctor Who that has spoken to me the hardest.
Exactly. My favorite episodes throughout have to be, the 11th Hour with Matt Smith's introduction. You have Heaven Sent, where Peter Capaldi's in the maze by himself.
That was an amazing episode.
Oh, yes, absolutely. But at the same time, I'm not talking about those right now. I could, but we're talking about Rosa, because even a week after, not even 2
days.
It's a couple days since this came out. and it just hits so hard.
And I mean, the emotions in that episode, they're really hard to put into words. I feel like this was one of the this to me is, I mean, people talk about an episode that got you into Doctor Who. This is the episode that makes me feel like I will never ever stop watching.
Yeah, and my wife, who's not really a sci-fi fan or really that big of a nerd, when I was first watching Doctor Who in front of her, she was so surprised, like, what are you watching? I'm like, oh, it's the 50-year anniversary. She's like, this has been on for 50 years? And I'm like, yeah. And so she's a Walking Dead fan, and at the time, it was one of those seasons that it was like starting to decline in quality. And so she couldn't wrap her head around how a show could last for 50 years. And she's like, well, when are they going to end it? And I was just like you said, after this episode, they're not. There is always going to be a possibility.
Always. And always, that word has so much meaning to any nerd fandom.
Yeah.
And I will always be a fan of Doctor Who. And this episode has not only solidified that, it has cemented it.
And one of the things, like, sometimes they do with historical things, like Vincent and the Doctor. If you remember at the end of the episode, Vincent was brought to the future, and you see how grateful he was for the curator saying all those great things about him. But after they brought him back and came back, you find out that history didn't change. He still committed suicide, and the Doctor has this speech, and I still want to get a tattoo of it, basically saying, the good things don't fix the bad things, but the bad things don't outweigh the good things, and they don't make them unimportant. At the end of this episode, at the end of Rosa, the Doctor and the companions go into the TARDIS, and after that moment where they realize history's back on track, they look at the Doctor and we're like, oh yeah, well, everything's good now, right? And the Doctor flat out does not lie to them. She says, no, her husband gets fired, she gets fired, life is hell for them.
Yeah.
But in, 1999? It was the Clinton eras, yeah.
1999, President Clinton gave her the highest honor any civilian can receive. I believe it was I can't remember what it is right now.
Wasn't it the Congressional Medal of Honor or something?
I want to say that's what it was.
I'm sorry if we have any listeners who are in the service and we're butchering actual medals for people of honor.
I'm actually pulling it up right now. Congressional Gold Medal.
Okay, there we go.
So that's what it was. The Congressional Gold Medal, June 15th, 1999.
It feels like I love Matt Smith, I love David Tennant, and I still love Christopher Eccleston, but there was always just this thing where in the episodes, even if you had highly emotional ones, when you left the episode, you knew it was done. Mm-hmm. You knew that, it was over with, you could start whatever, but it's very rare, and this is just a good sign of quality, where when you finish with something, it sticks with you, and for a little while, you just have to sit there, because you're like, I can't do anything for a little while. I have to think about this.
Well, yeah, and that episode was an emotional roller coaster, and I want to say this, I know they're not listening, but BBC writers, thank you.
Yeah, no kidding.
We, as Americans, thank you. You have given light to something in a world that is still anguished with all this racism, all these problems, all of this politics, which we don't talk about on the P3 network.
Exactly.
But we know it exists. We don't deny that it exists.
Yeah.
And we will never deny that it exists. But BBC, you have taken something and shown the world that there are people who will always fight it, and that no matter what, there are good people out there.
And I think one of the things to also take away from this is, like you were saying and I was saying, this is something we're going to show kids in the future. This is something that's going to start conversations. And just because we don't talk about politics or stuff like that doesn't mean that, it should be ignored. Doesn't mean that issues should be. And I really think this is something good. This episode, it just opens people's eyes.
On that note, we're going to close the show. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to doing more of these with you. More fun-loving episodes of the 13th Doctor.
Oh, yeah. We got arachnophobia in London. That's not the title. Forgive me.
Yeah, it's arachnophobia in London.
I cannot wait for that, because after this episode, I feel like that's going to be one of those D episodes that you watch when you're absolutely bored, or, let's face it, not saying we condone this, high off your ass and want to laugh.
What's saying we don't condone that? Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening. This has been the Doctor Who review. We'll see you probably in 2 weeks, because I think we're going to do 2 episodes at a time. I don't think it'll take us near as long next time, because I don't feel like we're going to have a hard-hitting episode like this for a while.
Probably not.
But thank you for listening, and have a great night.
Love you.